my name is Craig McInnes. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO at My Caribou, and I'll be hosting the session today with James. My Caribou is the only global partnering hub built specifically for med device manufacturers and distributors that will help you accelerate your growth through stronger partnerships. You can sign up for free. The platform, you can use it for free for 30 days. You can stay on it indefinitely for free in a limited capacity, or you can choose to subscribe and use all the features. Let me introduce you to today's speaker. Really excited to have James with us. James is the founder of Sanollo, a consultancy that helps medical technology companies enter new markets and build their international revenue. James has over 20 years of experience in opening overseas markets for medical device manufacturers, and he has previously held senior positions across multiple functions within leading healthcare and medical equipment organizations. James was previously based in the UAE for 6 years, implementing regional sales strategies within the Middle East, Africa, and India. So he is highly qualified for today's presentation, and we're excited to have him. Just before I pass it over to James, we'll ask a quick poll question. So we're curious from people on the presentation today, how many of you are actively selling in the Gulf market? And actually, maybe James, just to make sure we're on the same page here, the 6 countries of the GCC are?
Yeah, Saudi, UAE, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain.
Perfect. So let's see what everybody says. Interesting. So 2/3 of you are already in the market, and 1/3 are not, and obviously looking to go into the market. So great. We'll keep that in mind as we move through the presentation. So I'm going to pass control over to James. There you are, James, and we'll go through his presentation. We'll have one more poll question. We'll also stop for Q&A, and I'll just make one more reminder because a lot of people have joined since we started. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A panel. Over to you, James.
Okay, Craig, thank you for the introduction. As Craig mentioned, we are a medical device consultancy supporting international manufacturers with their distributor search and selection in overseas markets. So we do cover multiple territories, multiple countries, but today we're focusing on the Gulf market. And we're going to start by covering the market dynamics in terms of the healthcare structure within the region, then looking at how we adapt business plans to enter the GCC markets, looking at market entry checklists, distributor networks, how we evaluate potential partnerships in the region, and then finally, how we manage distributors in the region to ensure long-term sustainable growth for our products. So looking at the healthcare environment, starting with healthcare expenditure. So across the GCC markets, there was around $100 billion spent to be spent in 2022. That is a fraction of this expenditure in markets like the US or the German market. It's around half of the expenditure of markets like here in the UK or the French market, but it is comparable expenditure with markets like Italy and Spain, for example. And you can see the healthcare expenditure is growing at a good rate. From 2013 to 2022, there's around a 50% increase in healthcare expenditure across the region. In terms of medical devices, all the markets are heavily reliant on importation of medical devices. That is predominantly due to a lack of domestic manufacturing within the region. The only real contributor to domestic manufacturing is within Saudi Arabia, where they have around 30% of their medical devices are made in market. In terms of spend across the region, 85% of spend on medical devices is going through Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, of which 60% of that is going through Saudi Arabia. So they're the 2 key markets within the region, and then 15% has been made up by the smaller markets. In terms of the existing infrastructure in the market, you can see there's 813 hospitals in total. 482 of them are in the government sector and 331 in the private. So there is considerable private sector participation within the region. In terms of growth, there's pretty vast plans for growth in healthcare infrastructure that fit within various markets' visions. So each market has a vision. So every 8 to 10 years, they start a new vision. So at the moment, we're in the 2030 vision, of which Saudi Vision 2030 is the most talked about. So you can see half of all the new healthcare beds in the region are going into Saudi Arabia. And across the region, there's an additional 42,000 beds. Within that Saudi vision, there's an allocation of $66 billion allocated to healthcare infrastructure investment, which is pretty high. What's growing that spend is an increase in population growth. So the existing population of the GCC is around 59 million, and that's expected to go up to 68 million by 2050. So it's one of the highest regions in terms of growth population in the world. But the population is also going to be growing and aging in that time period. So currently 3% of the GCC are classified as elderly. By 2050, that will be 15%. So the population is growing, but it's also aging. There's a high prevalence of lifestyle diseases within the market: diabetes, smoking-related disease, heart disease, obesity, etc., are becoming more and more prevalent. So there's opportunities around health and wellness products going into the market, but also solutions to treat lifestyle diseases. Increased private sector participation is a key growth factor in the region. For example, in Saudi Arabia, they are looking to move from 40% private sector participation up to 60% by 2030. And that includes existing hospitals as well. So within Saudi Arabia, 290 government-run hospitals will move across to the private sector, and over 2,000 primary healthcare clinics will also be privatized within the region. So big changes in that market. Medical tourism is a key growth factor within the region and a key priority. In Dubai alone, last year, they had 500,000 medical tourists. Just behind that was Abu Dhabi. And in Kuwait, they had around 350,000. So for the UAE, it's generating $1 billion a year of revenue just in healthcare expenditure. And as these markets look to diversify their economies, healthcare tourism has been highlighted as a key area of investment. So again, looking at Saudi Arabia, where healthcare tourism is not so popular, they have a key focus in driving that number and driving the economy through healthcare tourists coming into the marketplace. So just looking at the market in terms of strengths and weaknesses, there is an established healthcare system in the GCC already. Some of the most renowned or incredibly well-renowned hospitals are in the region. There are international hospitals there as well. Cleveland Clinic, John Hopkins has a joint venture there. Some of the government sector hospitals are in the top 50 hospitals in the world. So there's a good healthcare system there already. Some of the physicians that are working within the market are from America, from Europe, etc. So they're very well qualified, the workforce. In terms of international accreditations, there's around 300 JCI accredited hospitals across the region, which shows that there's a good standard of healthcare there. The governments understand the needs of the population. They understand the needs of the expatriate and the local populations that are living within these marketplaces. Ministry of Health budgets, as a consequence, are increasing, and there's a relatively high expenditure on healthcare across all 6 markets. When we talk about the vision, so Vision 2030, for example, for the different markets, healthcare is in the top 5 priorities. So there's a clear vision, there's clear objectives, and there's clear strategies for how they're going to adapt for future demand. Some of the weaknesses then from the healthcare system is a high dependency on imports. So that sounds pretty beneficial for everyone on this call, I'm sure. But in terms of the market, the prices of medical devices is reasonably high because they're all being imported. During the coronavirus pandemic, they couldn't get hold of key products in terms of medical devices, consumables, etc. So that really raised awareness that there needed to be more of an investment in domestic manufacturing of products and to be more self-sufficient. Expatriate healthcare professionals is a huge issue across the region. Only 3% of nurses in the whole of the GCC are nationals. So 97% of nurses are expatriate. 80% of physicians are expatriate workers as well. So to match these vast infrastructure plans, they need to be bringing in healthcare professionals to actually run the hospitals, etc. So that is a weakness for the market. And also because they're heavily reliant on expatriates, there's a high staff turnover within the hospitals because nurses, for example, are either repatriating or they're going to markets that are paying more or to where they have a better quality of life, etc. And that means that there's a vast shortage in training as well, because they're having to constantly train these new expatriates that are coming into the market to work within the hospital environment. An ongoing weakness for the country, for the region as a whole, is political instability. So you see, for example, recent issues with the Turkish government. So made in Turkey products have dropped 90% over the last 2 years within Saudi Arabia, for example. The recent isolation of Qatar as a market would mean if you're a medical device company and you're holding your stock in a warehouse in the UAE, you were going to have problems accessing that to your hospitals within the Qatari market. And also, of course, the war in Yemen, continuous war in Yemen, and the Saudi Arabian involvement in that as well. In terms of cultural restrictions, it's been a historic weakness in the market. It's vastly improving, but there are still cultural restrictions there. Even things like the working week is different in most of the markets. The UAE has just changed to match European working week, but the restrictions are still there, so something to be aware of. So in terms of opportunities, there's a growing demand for quality of healthcare for all the points we just mentioned, growing population, vast investment in infrastructure, healthcare tourism, etc., changing patient needs. The market has always been an adopter of new technologies and high quality medical products. Although across the markets now, we are seeing the, let's say, low value consumables are being brought in from Asian markets, whereas historically they were being brought in from Europe or US or Australasia. Budgetary allocation is there, it's pretty high within the markets. Availability of social media, it's quite an interesting one. I think there's a perception that maybe social media is restricted within the region, but it's not. I was reading that the Saudi royal family have 7 million Instagram followers, and they use that as a messaging platform out to the younger population. So for medical device companies, LinkedIn is being used. If you're promoting health, wellness products, etc., you can use influencers in the region. So social media is a key marketing platform for companies operating or looking to enter the region. Ease of business. The markets are reasonably easy to do business in. English language is commonly spoken. You can now enter all the markets on a tourist visa where you can stay for 90 days. You can access by plane into Dubai. You can travel around the GCC pretty easily. In terms of foreign direct investment, that's something that's changed reasonably recently, but you can now set up your own company onshore in the majority of markets with 100% foreign ownership. So it used to be you would have to have a local partner. But now you can actually set up your own subsidiary or whatever you're looking to do within the market. In terms of threats, there is an established regulatory framework throughout the region in each specific market, but it's down as a threat because often there can be small changes to the regulatory framework that are implemented reasonably quickly. So it's something to be aware of when entering or dealing in the marketplace. The market is highly competitive. If you're not bringing innovation to the market, the chances are your competitors are already there. The rise of domestic manufacturing is a key one. If you look at the Saudi Arabian market, where they have the capabilities to manufacture, recently NUPCO, who manage all government procurement for government hospitals, they released national tenders where domestic manufactured products were given preference. So that's again something to keep an eye on for if you're looking to enter the Saudi market, is do we need to start manufacturing there, and when would that be? Slow decision making. The market is heavily tender based. Tenders can be delayed. If you're selling medical imaging equipment or beds into these hospitals that are being constructed, often construction is delayed. Opening of hospitals is delayed. And then rising healthcare costs, political instability, and economic vulnerability combined are they actually going to be able to achieve these goals, these 2030 goals, is a potential threat. There's still a reliance on oil revenue, et cetera, within the markets. So the first step is to create an internal business plan, really. So you need to understand the culture in the region. It's not going to be the same as doing business in Europe or doing business in the US. The culture is completely different. The decision makers will probably be nationals, so there'll be Emiratis or Saudi Arabian nationals within hospitals, but within your distributors, they're unlikely to be nationals. So the distributors contacts are likely to be Indian or Lebanese or Egyptian. So it's understanding multiple cultures in the region. In terms of cost, I think you have to allocate a certain amount of cost to the region because you're going to have to translate documentation. You're going to have to go out and visit your distributors. You're going to have to visit key opinion leaders, visit hospitals, really launch your product in the market. Because if you go into the market and don't allocate cost to it, the chances are that your distributors or whatever route you go to will not really have that market penetration that you're wanting. What's your appetite for risk? There is a reasonable amount of risk in the region. Distributors' turnovers can be reasonably high, particularly if you don't get the right distributor on board from the offset. Back office support in terms of, do you have the customer service? Do you have shipping capabilities? All these types of things. Resource allocation, who's actually going to manage your market entry into the Middle East? What's their expertise and their network like? Are all key parts of your internal business plan to consider. So once you've decided that you're going to enter the market, you need to start to consider what market you're going to prioritize. So where are you going to go first? So it might be an obvious thing to say, well, we saw that 85% of the product of spend is in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. But when you start to look at it, the competitive landscape, for example, you might find all your competitors are there, but your competitors are not in Bahrain, Oman, or Qatar. So it's important to have a look at what your competitors are doing within the region. Also, obviously, start studying healthcare data specific to your product. So if you're looking at number of procedures that fit your product, etc., seeing how many of those procedures are being carried out in each market. And then looking from there, what's the total market potential for each one of the markets, and blending that all together to establish which market to go to first, and understanding across the region really what the market need is for your specific product that you're offering. So the next stage is to get into market. So we recommend that you get into the market that you want to go into within the GCC. You meet with customers, hospitals, key opinion leaders, potentially with purchasing groups, and attend industry events such as Arab Health. It's reasonably easy to reach out to customers, particularly in the UAE. So if you can use platforms like LinkedIn, for example. If you're an American national, there'll be plenty of Americans working in the region, or UK-based companies looking for UK decision makers in the region. You can go out, show them your product, get an opinion, and really get some real data on whether your product is going to be accepted within the region. And then also visiting potential partners. So once you've shortlisted distributors or joint venture partners, you need to go out and meet them. It's a relationship-based market, so you need to show face within the region. And then from there, you need to really decide what your best route to market is. So the most common route to market for new market entrants is to select a distributor, and the distributor will take care of your product registration, your sales, your marketing, your after-sales support, your training of end users on your behalf, while working alongside you coming into market as and when. Another route to market, which is quite common, is setting up a marketing office. So, for example, in one of the UAE free zones, you can set up a marketing office for around $10,000 in about 10 days. You can set it up. You can have a business development manager or whoever based out of that office, and they are then managing a distribution network around the region, but you're actually having someone that can work alongside them from your company. You can also look to set up a subsidiary. As I mentioned, that 100% forward ownership now. The advantages of doing that is you can keep control of your messaging in the market. You can go out and educate your end users, but you're still going to have to use a distributor probably to actually do the distribution. That's very common. So if you look at the multinationals in the region, the majority of them are working alongside distributors. They're not actually taking care of the distribution of that physical distribution of the product. And then the last potential route to market is joint venture. So for example, if you're looking to enter Saudi, you feel there's real potential, you might enter into a joint venture with a manufacturing partner there. In terms of recommended route to market, it tends to be in that order. So the first route to market is through a distributor. You build up some good revenue, then you put someone on the ground in the market that's managing your distribution network in your marketing office, and then you start to would potentially set us up a subsidiary where you're putting 5 or 6 direct employees in each market, and then from there, once you've got a really established product that's demonstrating good growth in the market, you might look to start manufacturing domestically there, especially if it's going to mean winning more tender business. So in terms of the makeup of distributors in the Gulf, which, as I said, is the most common for new market entrants, but also multinational companies, etc., working alongside their distribution partners. There's 3 types of distributors. The first one is the smaller startup distributor. They tend to be set up by former employees of multinational companies. They tend to be pretty category specific, so expertise in a certain field, whatever it might be, central sterilization or gynecology. They're generally pretty ambitious because they're new to the market. They're driven to succeed because effectively the successful launch of your product is they're reliant on that to be successful as a business. So they give time to it, and their communication with you will be excellent. And they'll have strong specific relationships. So if your product is in a specific category that fits with theirs, they're going to have very good relationships within that particular speciality. Some of the disadvantages of these smaller companies is their financial stability, because they're new, payment terms, etc., from hospitals to them, payment terms out to you, it can be a bit of an issue. Availability of resources, limited market reach, national coverage. So limited market reach, they might be only selling in the private sector where they have their relationships. National coverage for a market like Saudi Arabia, the size of it, it's unlikely that they're going to have total market coverage because they're just setting up. And then their logistical setup and after-sale support is probably not yet going to be up to the standard that principal manufacturers would expect or that hospitals would expect. So that's really the disadvantage of these smaller companies. In terms of mid-sized companies, again, they tend to be focused on a particular specialty, but they might be focused on 1 or 2 particular specialties as they're a slightly larger company. They'll have great relationships with end users as well. They'll be category specific. So if you can fit your product into that category, then it's a good partnership. They're going to be well known in the market. They've been going for a while. The logistics setup and after-sale support will be better than the smaller distributors. Some of the disadvantages are they're quite selective on the principles that they'll select. So they're really looking for genuine innovation with the products that you're introducing and genuine innovation within their specific speciality. And if you're not offering genuine innovation, it's highly likely they'll already be selling one of your competitor products. Another disadvantage of the mid-sized distributors is that they can grow too quickly. So you might have good traction in the first couple of years, but then the priorities start to shift to other products. I've seen that happen quite a few times, these mid-sized distributors. So within the region, large distributors are very common. So if you look at the UAE market, there's probably 4 or 5 of these really large distributors. They're representing all the multinational companies. They've got a great reputation in the market. They've got incredible networks. They've got huge booths at Arab Health. They've got a vast marketing spend. They're incredibly financially stable. They'll be in multi-specialities across medical devices, but also within pharmaceutical, for example. They'll have first-class after-sale support, and they'll be winning a lot of tender business for hospital infrastructure as well. So on paper, these look like great distributors. and they are for certain products. But some of the disadvantages are the size of the portfolio. You can get a little lost if you're a new entrant. Also, they're always going to prioritize multinationals over your product. So if they're representing GE, Philips, and Medtronic, that's always going to be where their priority lies. So if your product is not getting the traction that maybe you first thought when you entered with the distributor, often with these larger distributors, they might not potentially spend the time trying to really develop that business when they really need to be focusing on their core and key principal manufacturers. Also, staff turnover is reasonably high within these large companies. They tend to move around quite a lot. So there can be issues there. One is you're having to retrain people. Another one can be often we've seen a business really thrive when somebody leaves within the team, but we've also seen it really decline as well. So, you know, if a key person or the key person representing your product moves on, it can be quite challenging to keep the growth going. Communication with these larger distributors can be challenging as well, and management challenges as well. It's difficult to really manage these distributors. Again, as I said, because their focus is really on their core multinational principal manufacturing partners. So in terms of how to evaluate distributors, so the first thing to do, which is really a kind of secondary research project that you can do internally, is to look at, firstly, your own distributor profile. So what is the ideal distributor that matches your product? And you might want to try and replicate that from markets that you're successfully exporting to already. To say, okay, we need to have national coverage. We need to be selling into both private and government. We need technical service team. We need training programs, etc. So creating a short list of distributors is key that match your profile. And so you want to have a little look at company history, see how established they are, get an idea of turnover, number of employees, etc. But you also want to look to see, okay, are they selling complementary products within our specific speciality? Are they selling competitor products already? So you can rule that distributor out. A good indicator is to look at of the quality of distributors, look at the companies they already represent, and also just to double check that on the company's websites as well to make sure it's a real representation. Because if they're representing 2 or 3 or 4 well-renowned medical device companies on an exclusive basis in Qatar, for example, you know that that's probably going to be quite a credible distributor. Also interesting to have a look at their website and social media activity. You can get a lot of information from there regarding recent installations they might have done or education programs they're running alongside some of their medical device principal manufacturers. And that gives you a good indication of that type of activity. In terms of suitability, we would recommend nowadays having a video call with your distributor at this point or potential shortlist. You should have 3 or 4 in the pipeline for each market at this stage, we would suggest. You want to be drilling down a bit, finding out how many sales staff they have, what the actual marketing team makeup looks like. A good question to ask is around marketing budget for new products as well, to see, okay, how focused are they on new product introduction? You know, are they selling into public, private hospitals, national coverage, understanding some of the key hospitals they're selling into, what their after sales support, technical service capabilities, etc. are. And of course, getting an understanding of their warehouse and distribution capabilities. Is that something the distributor's doing, or are they outsourcing their technical service and distribution? Is something you want to understand at that stage. So as we mentioned before, the GCC across all markets is a relationship-based market. So we recommend at this final due diligence stage that you're going out to actually meet with distribution partners to see them face to face and so start to think about a market entry plan with them. So you want to understand if they studied your product, do they understand it? Do they understand the opportunity? And really discussing with them what's in it for them. You know, distributors in the region, if you can bring them an innovative product that they make a good margin on and you're going to support them well, that's really the 3 key factors of success in the regions. But you want to understand for them what kind of, or you want to understand from them what type of margin they're making, because again, they're going to focus on high margin products over, let's say, low margin products that are, you know, the same if they're both medical equipment, for example. You want to understand and get agreement from them in terms of how much time is going to be spent on your product, I think is key. At this stage, we would always suggest that there's some discussions around having a product specialist within the distributor allocated to your specific product. We know some companies that will co-fund that, for example. And that means you've got a representative within the distributor who's going to be communicating with you and actually driving the product within that company. Willingness to engage in training, you want to understand that. They're going to come to your head office, they're going to train the trainer, all that kind of stuff. Final parts of due diligence, references from other principal manufacturers, a phone call to get a bit more information about the distributor. If they're not willing to give those references or put people forward, then that would be a red flag. Customer testimonials, potentially from hospitals, and then obviously financial checks before you move on to the next steps. So finally, how to manage distributors within the region to deliver sustainable growth. So distributor management in the Gulf is quite unique. As I said, if you can offer them an innovation that they're making good margin on, they're going to be very willing to be going out and educating customers on your product. But it's important to manage them as well. But the management has to be in collaboration. If you kind of micromanage them or tell them how much stock they have to take each month, etc., they're highly likely to switch off. So the most important element of this process is the onboarding stage. Again, going back to the collaboration and the relationship building. So first of all, training is key. We know that any salespeople in medical devices that are in front of customers and they have a bag full of products, they're going to sell the products that they feel most comfortable talking about. They're not worried about what questions clinicians are going to ask them regarding the product that they might not know the answer for. So that training at the early stage is very important. Targeting should be in collaboration. We shouldn't be giving distributors targets without having mutual agreement on them. So saying we want you to sell 100 this year and 150 next year is not going to work in the region. You need to have an understanding of targeting and work in partnership to achieving them. The culture merge is very important. The distributors in the region want to be seen as partners, not just distributors. So that culture merge, that partnership needs to be emphasized from the start. In terms of collaboration, and this goes back a bit to the cost that I mentioned when you're doing the initial internal business plan. I think in collaboration with distributors is absolutely key to make sure that they're actually carrying out all these activities. So joint marketing activities. So your marketing team should have direct access to their marketing team. You should understand what their marketing effectiveness is like within the market for your product. Joint client calls, certainly in the early days with your distributor, you want to get to know your distributor, but also you want to get to know the clients in the market because you might end up moving distributor or you might move to a subsidiary model, for example. So you want to understand the client base and also you want to be seeing the sales person within the distributor actually selling your product to clients. You want to make sure that the messaging that you're giving to them is being translated through to the end users. In terms of trials, we always recommend that, again, in collaboration, you should be doing product trials. If the hospital is requesting trials for your product, you want to be working in collaboration with the distributor on the trial process. You want to be going at the start of the trial, the end of the trial, certainly in the early days, to make sure that the distributor is capable of delivering those trials and having successful outcomes. I've seen plenty of trials in the region that are not managed correctly, and then they don't come to a sufficient end, and then distributors are just going from trial to trial to trial without actually closing deals. Joint tender management. So because tenders are so prevalent in the region, you're always going to come across tenders. And we recommend that you're collaborating with distributors on them, not just on, oh, here's my CE certification and here's my technical specifications, but understanding the pricing that they're putting in tenders as well. Again, on previous experience, we've seen distributors that manage that trial process and they try and recover their cost when it comes to tender. So they're adding additional 20% onto the price. So those tenders are lost to competitors that are hardly doing any marketing activity in the market, but they are 20% less expensive than what your distributor might be charging. So you want to be getting some understanding of the full tender process and what they're actually submitting in terms of price. Joint contracting and delivery. So I think this is important as well, not only with your distributor, but with the client, with the end user. So ideally, you want, if you're installing 50 hospital beds in a new hospital in Abu Dhabi, certainly in the early days of your market entry, you want to be going there, shaking the hand of the decision maker, patting the distributor on the back, and really getting to know the end users as well. So I think that joint delivery is pretty key. In terms of account management for your distributors, so there's two elements. One is encouraging your distributor to manage their clients correctly, and the other is you managing your distributor correctly. So client intelligence, so understanding where the success stories are and why they're successful within your client base. So that's in terms of which hospitals you're in, for example, and then looking at client development plans. So there's plenty of corporate hospital groups, Mediclinic, for example, Saudi German hospital group, where if you're in one hospital, you want to be encouraging the distributor to roll out within that group. So really evaluating, how do we get the client success model and roll it out within that group. There are easy ways, or not easy, but kind of effective ways to increase, let's say, your installation base or your customer base within the region. Also, you find distributors can sometimes sell on to maybe 2 or 3 wards in a hospital and say, okay, that's a great job, done. We'll move on to another hospital. How do you actually roll out or encourage your distributor to roll that product out across the whole hospital? So just having that client intelligence is key, and working on it with your distributor. And then looking at account deal-based marketing. So it might be within certain hospital groups, you're doing deal-based marketing, for example, to get maximum penetration within that group. And you're passing that on to your distributor. In terms of distributor checklists, we recommend that's done on a quarterly basis, and it's done in collaboration with your distributor. So they have bought into what the KPIs are within that checklist. So it might be marketing effectiveness, deals closed, forecasting, engineers trained, hospital staff trained, etc. And then finally, on an annual basis, looking at market growth plans. So you might be sitting with your distributor and really analyzing where your sales are to say, well, 90% of our sales are going into the private sector. What's the growth plans for the government sector, for example? Client growth plans as well. Okay, so we're in these hospitals. So how do we get into other hospitals within the group or in the particular region? And then distributor benchmarking. So reviewing, benchmarking your distributors within the region, investing in the high-performing ones, nurturing the mid-range distributors, and then pruning and firing the underperforming distributors, and having a strategy to bring new distribution partners in behind them. So I think in summary, the region is investing heavily in infrastructure. The ease of business in the region is improving. And it's a very good time to bring your device to the GCC. And I think it's about finding the right channel that you want to adopt, and then finding the right distributors and partners, and then managing them effectively, and being really proactive within the market and working in collaboration with distributors and also your key client base. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, James. Really appreciate that. Some great content. And we've already started to see some questions come in. I'll just encourage everyone to put any questions you have now into the Q&A panel. We also had some great questions in advance of today's presentation that we'll get to as well. So we'll cover that in the next few minutes here. And I will do a quick demo of my Caribou at the very end. But in the meantime, let's get started. So James, one of the ones you and I talked about just before the call today came in advance, which was around the acceptance of women in business and leadership in that part of the world, and impacts that might have on relationships and how you target the market. So let's hit the easy one first, shall we?
Yeah. So I think as part of the reforms, again, talking about these visions 2030, women are playing an important role in business across the region now. You see that in many companies through the GCC that now have female chief executives, for example. In terms of female leaders going across to manage distributors, there's no issues there. When doing business in the region, the only market that can be challenging would be Saudi Arabia. So if you go back 10 years ago, it was completely different. But now, so for example, women in business that were unmarried 10 years ago would struggle to get a visa to go into Saudi Arabia. Now, women can just go in on tourist visas. But what you'll notice there is segregation is still there. So when you're at the airport or you're waiting in a hospital waiting room, they do have specific areas for women to wait in, for example. So there's still that kind of cultural differences, but generally in business, there's no issues. In fact, I was reading that the Saudi Arabia now has 35% female workforce, which is a vast change from what it was 10 years ago. So it's not there yet, but it's certainly evolving. And then going in and out of markets like the UAE is absolutely no problem at all for women in business. There's a huge expatriate population there that are all working in business. I think there's 100,000 British people living in the market, for example, that are all professionals.
Great. There's a question about exclusivity, and this comes up on virtually any market that we talk about. But should we offer exclusivity to distributors? Maybe under what context? What are the pros and cons from your perspective?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So if we segregate the markets a little bit, if you look at the smaller markets, we'd always encourage exclusivity. So Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, etc. Because the market's so small, it's quite difficult to have non-exclusive distributors because the actual hospital base is pretty limited. So you have multiple distributors going in with the same offering, for example. Obviously, if you have multi-specialities within your own portfolio, you can offer exclusivity to different companies within different specialities that you're offering. If you look at Saudi, it depends what distributor you go for. If you want national coverage, then you could go exclusivity for one distribution partner that has the ability to reach all private and healthcare facilities throughout the market. But again, you might look at segmenting that. So you might have an exclusive distributor for private hospitals, you might have an exclusive distributor for military hospitals, and you might have one for government hospitals. So yeah, I would say in general, exclusivity is common and certainly requested by distributors, but the only market that you would want to look at that carefully is Saudi Arabia, because the majority of the distributors in the other markets will be covering national healthcare facilities.
Excellent. I'm just looking at a couple of questions that are coming in through the live session here. So I believe you mentioned NUPCO or NUPCO earlier. So this is a few questions in one. In Saudi Arabia, what is the role of NUPCO? Did I get that right, James? And what is the process? How long is that process? Ways around it? So do you want to touch on that one?
Yeah, so NUPCO are a government organization, and their role is they're basically centralizing all procurement for government facilities within Saudi Arabia. So they'll release national tenders for medical equipment. So that infrastructure project we mentioned for the 22,000 new hospitals, they'll be managing all the tenders for those particular hospitals. So they set criteria within tenders as well. And that's why I was mentioning that recently these national tenders have had a preference for domestically manufactured products.
Okay, and a second question from the online group today. So this is speaking about relying on heavily on imports and not having any local production facilities. Do you know about any production capacities that are established by the Egyptian government?
No. In terms of Egyptian government in the GCC?
I think that's the context, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe the person who asked that, if you want to clarify it further, feel free to.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure, but we are seeing, let's say, multinational companies. They are now looking at establishing manufacturing partners. This is predominantly happening in Saudi Arabia, and it's predominantly related to these NUPCO tenders. So, for example, Monliquor, they were importing their procedure trays, procedure packs into the market of Saudi Arabia. They have now created a joint venture with their distributor, who's one of the largest distributors in Saudi Arabia. So they have a joint venture now where they will start manufacturing those procedure trays within the Saudi market so that they can access these tenders, and also they can have better pricing for the Ministry of Health, and also quicker turnaround of products. But the issues of manufacturing at the moment in Saudi Arabia, which is likely to change, is the manufacturing of high-tech medical devices. So there's going to be a development process where currently they're manufacturing kind of low-value, low-end consumables, and now they're starting to bring in, through these joint ventures and investment in manufacturing capabilities from the government, they're starting to bring in slightly more advanced technology. But if you look forward 10, 15 years, you would be expecting Saudi Arabia to be manufacturing, or companies will be manufacturing in Saudi Arabia, for the domestic market there, but also potentially to be distributing out to, let's say, India, North Africa, the rest of the Middle East.
So there is a question related to Africa. I shall bring this one up, which is, and I'm not sure I understand this one. If you don't, we'll ask for some clarification. But what steps are required to stop the proliferation of products into African markets? I'm not sure I'm following that one. Do you?
Yeah, I think maybe they're talking about parallel trading. So you sell across your distributor in the Middle East, and then they sell it out into some of the African markets, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think to stop that, it has to be, one is the relationship building of your distributor, the trust of your distributor. The other is obviously your stringent territory regulations, or stringent territory territory set within your distributor agreement. So, okay, you have Saudi Arabia only, so we don't want you selling across border. You know, that question can also be asked just for people moving products around the GCC or anywhere in the world, really.
Right.
There's a trust element there. Some companies that we've worked with in the past, they do specific labeling if you think that that's a problem. Another thing is to standardize your pricing. So there's actually no advantage of the distributor in Dubai. If their pricing is standardized, there's no room for parallel import and export. But yeah.
Okay, excellent. Another question quickly. I think I'll make this probably the last one. There are a few other ones we'll have to get to with a follow-up afterwards. But so this question is around payment terms associated with agreements through distributors. What do you recommend there? And I guess my question for you as well would be, is it different in that part of the world than it might be in Europe or in the US and so on?
Yeah, I mean, payment terms in an agreement, when you enter into agreement with distributors in the Gulf, we would always recommend that you start on pro forma payment. So they're paying you up front for products, particularly in high value capital equipment. And then you could put in your agreement, for example, we've seen this done quite a lot, that is a 6-month review, and after 1 year, then you're starting to bring in, you know, a 90-day payment term. In terms of payment to distributors from hospitals, it's pretty reliable. It's not like some markets where they're waiting 1, 2, 3 years for payments, and then it can be a real strain on your distribution partner. Payments are pretty reliable. If you're working with one of these larger mid-sized distributors, the payments are normally pretty good, pretty reliable. Certainly in my time operating in the region, I've not had too many issues as I have in other markets regarding distributors paying manufacturers for products. But I think when you enter, until you build that trust with your distributor, put them on pro forma invoicing, unless you know, you might want to take a risk. If you're selling lowish value consumables, you might want to take a risk and give them some payment terms. But if you're selling, you know, if you give 90 days to your distributor and they buy $500,000 worth of product for you for a tender, and then the tender is actually delayed 6 months by the time the products have arrived in the UAE or wherever, there might be some problems. They're not getting paid, and then there's a real issue there. So if you're selling high value equipment, we would certainly be looking at getting those paid up front.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. I'm going to wrap up with a few things here because we have just about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I will share James's contact information. Some of the questions that came in particular in advance, were very specific to your business, and my suggestion would be reach out to James directly. You can have a conversation, and perhaps it's something he could even help you with as you're obviously looking at these markets. So very quickly, I'm just going to tie a few of these concepts back to the platform, and then I'll wrap up with James's contact information. And I'll do this very quickly. So this is my Caribou platform, and everything that James talked about today in terms of approach to the market, we cover in the platform. I'll just cover that in about 2 or 3 minutes here. This is a view of the world in the platform in terms of looking at markets. We cover 105 countries. So for example, James mentioned Saudi Arabia. If you want to do some market analysis in Saudi Arabia, we have over 800 data points on each of these markets, as well as other obviously Gulf countries, including things like the regulatory environment, trends and indicators, health utilization, assets, employment, everything from procedures to number of physicians of certain types, disease states, all of which James mentioned previously. So we do have that coverage around the globe. This happens to show my active markets as green and my target markets as purple, but you can see, even if you want to sort of zoom in on the Gulf countries, you could do so here and drill into UAE, for example, and other countries there as well. The second thing we do is help you find partners. So again, I'll use the example today that James talked about. So let's say we're looking for distributors or sales agents, and maybe I'll use Saudi Arabia since that came up a fair number of times here. So we have 217 distributors in Saudi Arabia. These are actually headquartered in Saudi Arabia. And from there, if you wanted to drill into various product categories to find, more specific fit for you to potentially distribute, that's narrowed it now down to 26 distributors. And from there, you might look at things like national versus regional, how long they've been in business, do they have a broad portfolio or a narrow portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. Once you're ready to, you can actually view any of these companies. You can view their full company profile, their website, their LinkedIn page, and then ultimately connect with them through the platform. And they may, in fact, ask you a few questions here as a sort of introduction to connecting with them. James also mentioned shortlisting. So you can shortlist from here as well. So this was an example of a list we were working on with for Saudi distributors, for a Texas-based manufacturer, and you can start to work through a short list of those as you interact with those. We also have something called opportunities, which I'm actually going to show you. I'll show you just some of the real opportunities. These are real posted opportunities from companies all over the world using our platform. So for example, as recently as today, a Norwegian disruptive patient monitoring technology looking for sales and distribution partners. And you can see where they're looking for them. So Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and so on. And what this will do is promote this company to distributors in that area, and they can respond in app and indicate some interest in working with you. So if you're looking to go to Saudi Arabia or one of these other countries, you could post an opportunity, and we'll promote that. It will actually draw potential partners in for you. And then lastly, I'll just show you very quickly, we do have the ability to manage your partners in here as well. So in this particular case, I am managing partners in various countries, as you can see here. So I've got 2 distributors in Canada, I've got 2 in Brazil, and so on. You can invite them in here to work with you. Completely up to you how you want to do that. You could just manage the relationship without them collaborating, or you can invite them in to collaborate with you. As you can see here, we can do sales forecasting with each of these organizations. We can share files, we can have discussions. I could even, for example, send out a single message or file or multiple files to all my partners or a subset of my partners at any given time through this platform as well. We even have the ability, I won't get into details today, but if you were working with a Saudi-based distributor on a tender, you could actually do that right in the platform. You can set goals, some of the things James talked about as well. So I'm just going to wrap it up there. More than happy to spend more time on the product. I do like to give everybody just a quick view of it. There's a lot more to it, but it is free to sign up. It's free to try all that functionality for 30 days, and you can stay on the platform for free in perpetuity if you're just looking to be listed on the platform. James and I are both at Medtech next week. I know both of our calendars have filled up pretty heavily, but we still have a few time slots available. If you'd like to meet with us there, if you happen to be going, I believe we're both going to Arab Health as well. So certainly there's James' email information. There's mine. We have another webinar coming up later in November, which is around Medtech partnerships and why they fail. This is more of a roundtable, so a series of questions asked to 3 experts from the industry, and that's you can see the speakers on that panel. Angela will post a link to register for that session as well. And then lastly, just to wrap up, here's James' contact information, website for Sanollo, my information as well as again the link to sign up for the platform. I want to thank James for this. A lot of great information. I know the Gulf countries are of interest to so many manufacturers globally that are trying to expand internationally, and we really appreciate you putting that content together today. Please feel free to reach out to James for further questions, to talk to him further about entering the Middle East in general, Gulf countries, as well as India is an area of expertise for him as well. So please feel free to reach out to him. Thank you all for attending today. I think we hit it exactly the 1 hour mark. So great job, James, and thank you everyone for attending today.